In an attempt to shift the results of the presidential election, two Colorado presidential electors have filed a federal lawsuit challenging Colorado state law that prevents them from switching political allegiances following their initial vote. Secretary of State Wayne Williams, who is named as the defendant in the case, responded by calling the plaintiff's attempt arrogant and going against the will of Coloradans, violating Colorado law. Patty, if any state's going to have some, I guess what we call them faithless electors, I guess it would start here in Colorado. It's been our theme for 2016. What do you think?
Well, let's remember the Coloradans who walked out at the Republican convention this summer. This is, besides the fact that Wayne Williams, who is more forceful in his response to these people than we've ever heard. I mean, he called them odious. It's really compelling. Obviously, his press person is doing a good job of inspiring him to use the language correctly. You know, if people don't like the Electoral College, and a lot of them don't like the system, then get rid of the system. But don't try to change the system, and fight Colorado law on this. Interesting that Polly Baca is leading the charge on this, former state lawmaker who certainly knows what Colorado's laws are. It's a very quixotic effort. It obviously is not going to make the change, but it's fun to be back on the headlines and international headlines with a Secretary of State who uses very interesting language.
David, you're one of our two esteemed lawyers to the table. I'm assuming this is a legal long shot, am I right?
I think it's up in the air. That we have the Electoral College, and then we have this Colorado statute which says if electors don't vote the way the popular vote goes in Colorado, then there's a punishment for them. And there will be, I think, a hearing in federal district court on Monday about the constitutionality of that Colorado statute. But regardless of whether that statute is upheld or not, the electors are free. They may get punished. You know, Polly Baca could be thrown in prison for all we know after she votes. But under our Constitution, there is nothing that can be done to stop electors from voting their conscience. That is what the Constitution says. It's the system created. The Electoral College is a deliberative body, and they can vote however they choose to vote. And I think that's an important backstop in our system. I don't think it's going to change the result this time, but the fact is the electors are free, and nothing, you can punish them after, but you can't stop them from exercising their freedom when they cast that vote.
Eric, do you think there's a chance this catches on, even, again, not to suddenly change the election, but that there other faithless electors might be more than just a couple, maybe a large handful? Do you think this catches on, or is this simply stuck right here in Colorado?
I think that's what they intended in Colorado. They wanted to light a fire to see if it could catch on. There was one Trump elector who published an op-ed recently in the New York Times out of Texas who is saying he will not vote for Trump. Now, I think I heard that he has resigned, and some other elector who will vote for Trump has stepped into his place. If this was 2000 with Bush v. Gore, which, let's not forget, that Electoral College vote was 271 to 267 after Florida went to Bush. Then this becomes, for a practical matter, I will let Penn and David do the law here as our, quote, esteemed attorneys. But as a practical matter, you know, Trump has 306 electoral votes. He can lose 36 and still become president. He just can't lose 37. So I think this is grasping at straws, and let's also not forget that the two Colorado electors are Democratic electors since Hillary Clinton carried the state. Democratic electors can be as faithless as they want. If anything is going to change here, it would require 37 Republican Trump electors from states that Donald Trump carried to be faithless. I happen to believe in the Electoral College. I think it serves the country well and has over time, though I do think there should be, as David points out, some degree of free agency here, which is the original intent of it. If not, just why even have them meet? Just record the computer votes, 9 for Colorado in this column, X number from California in this column, and so on. So, you know, I do think that they should have some legal right to exercise independent judgment.
Penn, why do you think it starts here in Colorado so often? I mean, we're not exactly a hotbed of liberalism or conservatism. I'm not sure we had a strong rebellious streak as a state, but somehow it always comes out of Colorado.
You know, I think it's a couple things. Number one, if you look at the entire election cycle, in many ways, Colorado was out of step with the rest of the country. In Colorado, Sanders won the Democratic nomination and Cruz won the Republican nomination. So one could argue that Coloradans didn't really want either of the candidates who ended up in the finals because they'd picked other candidates. Second, I think particularly now with the space we're going into with a Trump presidency coming about, I think it's important we're careful about the words we use and how we use them. I've heard the term faithless electors, and that bothers me. I know a number of them refer to themselves as Hamilton electors because they talk about the original intent of the Electoral College. I think, you know, and I took a look at the 12th Amendment. There's not a whole lot of case law, but this is going to be an interesting lawsuit because it is not clear, as David said, that a state can compel an elector to vote a particular way because the elector's office and authorization is grounded in the U.S. Constitution. And some would argue there is a bit of free agency there and that the college was intended as a backstop to prevent the will of the general public, if we ever went berserk, from doing something crazy. And some would argue that that's where they feel we are now. So this is going to be an interesting process. I don't think I agree with Eric. I don't think that Donald Trump is going to lose 37 electors in this process. But I think because this lawsuit is in Colorado and in other places, I think it's an important principle that it get litigated and dealt with in some fashion because there's the likelihood that it will recur at some point in our history or in our future.